Hello, we are interviewing the brilliant Larry Fessenden. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah.
Fessenden.
Fessenden.
Fessenden. Is that German? What is that?
Welsh.
Welsh. Larry Fessenden has been directing horror films for 25, 30 years?
Something like that, yeah.
And the movie Habit is one of my favorite movies, independent films of all time. Definitely one of my favorite vampire films. It was made in the mid 90s. 1996 is when it came out, and it's about a man. Can you tell us what it's about a little bit in a very short, concise way?
It's sort of a bohemian lifestyle guy who works in the Lower East Side, meets a mysterious woman and becomes obsessed that she's a vampire, which isn't revealed till well into the picture.
Halfway, 45 minutes into the movie, right?
Yeah, we come to know him more as an alcoholic, and so he's an unreliable narrator, and things spiral out of control towards the end. But it's really about loneliness in the big city.
A lot of people have maybe misinterpreted it as being like an AIDS metaphor, right? Because he gets bit by this woman and his health takes a toll. It's not about AIDS at all. Were you thinking about that at all?
You couldn't help but think about that in the 80s, and so there was a little residue of that. It's about all those things. You know, the thing I really want to say, especially in the modern culture where everything's supposed to be so specific, I believe in the metaphor, and so it's about AIDS, it's about alcoholism, it's about loneliness, it's about friendships, and it's about a lot of things. So it's whatever you want it to be.
When you made the movie, were you single at the time? You're a family man now. You have a wife, you have a son. But at the time you made the movie, were you single?
No, I was with the same woman, and we had a lot of sex scenes. Me and the actress, and we were very well behaved, and we were very above board about it all. But it was quite randy.
They're very sexy scenes. There wasn't an intimacy coordinator back then.
No, I don't do that. I was the intimacy coordinator.
And, but it was. I mean, it looked very real, but it's not real sex, obviously, right?
Right.
Had you had discussions with the actress about it beforehand?
Oh yeah. In fact, we rehearsed it a lot. I mean, we were very, as I say, it was very above board. We were adults. And we knew we were making art, and any kind of discomfort we talked through. Actually, on the first day of shooting one of the sex scenes, she became uncomfortable, and I think she had an existential moment because there were just like two other crew members in the room, and she was like, "I'm pretending to have sex with this guy, and there are two other guys," and she said, I need to take a moment. And, we gave her the moment, and we talked her off the roof, as it were, and we carried on.
Were you always a vampire fan? Like, why vampires for that particular story? Because there's a lot of ways you could have gone with a movie about isolation, alcoholism, and, a man who's searching for something and not getting it out of his current lifestyle. Summer Blood is very much influenced by the movie. You could almost say it's a comedic ripoff of the film. And I would disagree, but I would say it's very much heavily borrowed from the movie. But why vampires? Why to tell that particular story?
Well, I just loved monsters when I was a kid. Yeah. I've also made a Frankenstein movie. I'm going to make a Wolfman movie. So
that's amazing.
I'm going through the canon. And I like metaphor as a way to talk about very real issues, everyday issues. In fact, that's kind of my shtick, is taking wonderful cliched monsters and reinventing them by sort of realizing the truths that were being discussed. And vampirism is about a lot of things. It's about sexual addiction. It's about the otherness, all of this. There's lots of history about vampirism and how it plays in our culture. But for me, it was a great way to talk about loneliness and also the madness, thinking that your girlfriend, paranoia, is she really a vampire? It doesn't seem likely. Yeah. And, there's a lot of paranoia things. If you're paranoid about your health, I used to have panic attacks, things like that.
Like when you would get an AIDS test, or what would make you have a panic attack? Thinking that
much more existential stuff.
Oh, yeah? Cancer? Thinking you were dying of cancer?
Absolutely. Or, heart failure on the subway, all these kind of things.
Yeah, I have those.
Yeah.
Are you over them now, or do you still have those things?
I'm still an anxious person, absolutely.
Do you feel like, because Summer Blood is a lot about a man looking for a connection, he can't find it, he's afraid of commitment, he's afraid of kids, he's afraid of getting married, but then ultimately he's like, this life without kids, living a solipsistic lifestyle, having sex with a lot of random people, he wasn't getting meaning out of that, so he thought maybe the route of kids and marriage is the way to go. Do you feel like your anxiety increased when you had a son? Or has, because I feel like you're putting a son out there in the world where there's so much danger and whatnot. So do you feel like it must have just increased your anxiety, right?
In a way, yeah. But I guess I haven't changed. I still see the world as a very dangerous and sad place. And in a weird way, I try to make horror movies that help connect us and sort of share the reality that everybody suffers from fear. And,
Yeah.
And so I see it as a positive mission, even though the cliche is that horror is depraved and obsessed with the dark side. But I think by acknowledging the dark, you can find some lightness and redemption and all the rest. And actually community, these are other cliches that I'm interested in. So as for anxiousness, it comes and goes. Now the thing is, you get old, then you really should be worried about your health.
Yeah.
And friends come and go, so sense of loneliness continues. I'm married, I have a kid. The only thing is that you then have to set an example, so you can't indulge your anxieties. But
if you show your kid you're afraid, that's going to make them.
But actually, I think there's some strength in showing weakness. This is something I really believe. Not to get too heady, but I think if you acknowledge your fear, then that's That's what actual bravery is, and I think the problem with our culture is it's so machismo that there's no room for vulnerability. I mean, and then the response to that is a whole other problem. So, anyway, these are all issues.
Anxiety, though, is a major problem, too. And are we doing enough to quell anxieties, or are we just trying to stoke more fears? For example, Wendigo and The Last Winter seem to be about the environment, right? And about the retribution of the environment from Wendigo and The Last Winter about basically the collapse of the world, basically, right? Or the collapsing, or the environment taking revenge. Do you think, in terms of kids, we are making kids more anxious by saying we are basically fucked and the world is doomed and we've fucked up the environment to such a degree? Kids, rightfully so, have a resentment and bitterness towards us because we've screwed up the world. But do you also think it might be causing some damage where it's giving them a sense of hopelessness?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I mean, I would say that the different media outlets have realized that by focusing on their narratives, they can sell more shoes and shampoo. So, there's one side that is doomsaying, but the other side is doomsaying as well. So each side is trying to outdoom the other. They just have different solutions. What I find aggravating is that we're not talking about the solutions, that we should all work together. But see, we can't even agree on the problems. It's all been commodified by our culture of commercialism. It's an absolute death spiral from capitalism. And yes, you can blame the boomer generation, because we did get raised on, junk food and TV dinners, and commercialism took really hold in the 50s and 60s. But then there was the counterculture, and then that was commodified by the computer generation and, the me generation. You have your own playlist, your own everything. Everything's about your identity, because they can sell stuff to you that way. So this is the collapse of society. That's where we are. And, my movies are about nature, revenge. Not really. They're about our self-betrayal, and that's what Habit's about, and that's what The Last Winter's about. We've betrayed ourselves by not tending to the natural rhythms and so on. So it's an overall critique of humanity that I'm basically engaged in, which is timeless. I mean, you can look to the great works. Not that I'm among them, but
you are definitely among them.
But those are the themes that ignite. I think any thinking person is like, why can't we get this right?
I think what makes a great auteur, a great director, a great writer director is a body of work that's very singular and very specific. It's like a great band who has their own sound, and I think you've definitely done that with your movies, and they're fantastic. I, of course, Habit is a huge influence on Summer of Blood. It's amazingly informed by it. Also, a movie called Vampire's Kiss from the '80s with Nicolas Cage.
Absolutely.
What were some vampire films? Were there any movies that informed your sensibilities as a horror director? Any specific directors or films that you feel like, that you love or admire? Because I think about the filmmakers I love. You're on that list, along with several other filmmakers. It's a short list, but you're on that list of people that inspire me to do better work, inspire me to make movies.
Well, the question is so wonderful and loaded, and sort of illustrative already. I mean, I like Hitchcock, I like Kubrick, I like Scorsese. I like the directors that do have a definable agenda of both visually and thematically. So that is just what I'm attracted to. And as for vampirism, I mean, the thing about Habit is it didn't come out of a love of vampire movies. In fact, I prefer Frankenstein. I love The Wolfman. I like The Creature from the Black Lagoon. It was almost the lesser of the, but it was absolutely vital to the themes. And when I made it, the movies were just Frank Langella as Dracula. You know, they were very formal, very classical, and I actually love that movie.
Yeah.
But you felt like it was the same old thing, a period piece, and I wanted to say, what would it really be like? What would it be like? And that's kind of the question I ask whenever I approach these great mythologies. Well, what would it be like now? And that's why even some filmmakers who, you know, when Aronofsky made Noah, I was like, let me see that, because I want to see how this would play. Although, of course, I would even make it a modern tale, and that would be interesting. Because I like to show that a lot of the great mythologies still are relevant today, and the story repeats itself. You know, we're still all after the white whale and all that sort of thing.
Have you seen Downsizing, by the way? Because I just saw that for the second time recently. I was entertained, and it feels like it's a modern kind of Noah's Ark story in a weird way. It's a fantastic, brilliant, underrated movie. But continue, I apologize.
That's right. No, you're right. I didn't see it, but...
I mean, at least the third act of it goes that way. Before you continue, let me just check. Just like to check a thing while make sure things are still going. Beautiful. Great.
I've got red here. Although...
Yep.
It's flashing. Is that a bad thing?
The red is flashing?
Yeah.
No, the rest is supposed to flash.
It is?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
You got some serious technology.
I know. These are amazing cameras. Okay, so... But
to speak to the vampire theme, you know, I love Martin.
Yeah.
And
George Romero.
I loved Vampire's Kiss. That also, these are movies that, you know, take the cliches and sort of re-examine them.
How about... go ahead. I'm sorry.
Was Coppola's Dracula out yet? I
think
even
that
remember.
was early 90s, 92, 93, 94.
Yeah,
also, two in the mid-90s. I think right before Habit, there was a New York vampire... a couple of New York vampire films being made. There was Nadja and then Abel Ferrara's Addiction. I wonder if those movies... I'm sure, obviously, you were influenced by the New Wave movement of indies in the early 90s, because you were part of that, too. Because before Habit, you were making shorts, and you actually made a feature before Habit? Or was Habit a more experimental feature before it became the movie that we've all gone to see?
I made Habit in 1981 as an NYU project on video, and I discovered you could use video to tell feature films, which was incredible. So the freedom to suddenly sort of let your hair down. Now, it almost ran awry because I made a 90-minute movie that probably had a 17-page script.
Yeah.
So
91, you said? 91?
Yeah, I mean, it was a full length. I mean, maybe it was 80 minutes. But the point is that I did make it, and it wasn't really that good, and that's why I remade it years later, because I was like, this is still a story I want to tell. Nadja and the Addiction were made at the same time as mine. I didn't know those guys, but they both got into Sundance the year before I had finished my movie. So they sort of got the credit for making the, you know, downtown New York, revitalizing the vampire mythology. They were both black and white. They're both cool movies, but of course I've always resented them because the following year when I put Habit to Sundance, I didn't get in, and I feel like they'd said, well, we've done that. What are we, the vampire clearinghouse? So I do feel those movies affected my trajectory, but so be it. They're cool movies.
Do you have? I mean, bitterness is a hard thing. It's natural. It's something humans deal with. Especially independent filmmakers, all artists. Do you feel like as you've gotten your credit where it's due after 20 years of making movies, or do you feel like you still don't get the credit you deserve as a great pioneer of horror, independent horror?
I'll be honest. In a weird way, I feel like I get the credit. I'm very honored by how I'm treated in the press. They always throw the word icon or legendary in front of me. It's because of my producing career, I think, particularly, but in any case. So I get a lot of credit, but what I don't get is the money. So the bitterness does set in, and you're just like, this is crazy. I can't. And then the movie comes out, and it's well-liked, and you're like, yeah, but nobody supported me to get it there.
Yeah.
So... And as for bitterness, you know, we've talked about bitterness, loneliness, sex, fear. Those are all things that I think should be addressed. And be honest, we all share them. So I'm not afraid to say that I'm bitter, because that's part of the struggle. You're frustrated. You want to get your vision out, and I do feel I have a certain perspective that I feel is vital. It's vital to me, but I want to make horror movies that have a different perspective. You know, they're not about the body count and so on. So in that sense, I'm hungry to get my work out there, and when I don't get the funding or the support in advance, Yeah, I'm bitter and annoyed.
I have so many questions to ask you. I want to go back to Habit as well too, and specifically about the themes and whatnot, because I want to talk about that. But just staying on independent films, so Habit was made for a very low amount of money at the time, but Wendigo and Last Winter, there were slightly higher budgets, right? What was? Can we talk about there was a trajectory, right, of going from at the time a $65,000 film, $800,000 film? How much? Can we talk about that? We don't have to talk about numbers at all.
But I'm looking at your monitor and you're going like this, but actually what you're forgetting is then it goes like that. Because Habit was about 60K, 120 to finish. We blew it up and the whole thing for a real release, which was great.
35 millimeter
an
print
independent release. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So we blew it up from the 16. I got no distribution. I released it independently. And then it. Yes, and it caught on. And we ended up releasing in 40 cities.
Oh my God!
But
I
would handcraft the ads at night because it was newspaper ads.
Yeah.
I would call the theater. I call Greg Lemley. Can we play in L.A.? We got this little picture. We got these reviews, this and that. It was all literally step by step, and I did it for almost another year and a half, well after the movie was finished. So I always say this is about real loyalty to your own product.
Yeah.
You can't do that if the movie isn't good, but I was sure there was something special about it. So anyway, that's why I became a pioneer of self-distribution and why I became a champion of the little filmmaker, because I'm like, it's not a given that this isn't a good movie just because it didn't catch.
And you can't rely on other companies to say, we're going to promote it, we're going to get it out there. You do have to do the work.
No, it's your own thing. And by the way, that's obviously your legacy, and I commend you for it. Not only do you make a lot of movies.
Don't talk. Fuck you. Yeah. Thank you, Larry. That's great. Right. But I don't want to talk about me. Hey,
fair enough. Anyway, then Wendigo cost... What was the deal with
that? Then people came to you, or did you still have to go and scrap for the money?
No, I had to scrap that money together.
Yeah.
It was, but I was very, very lucky to... I met one producer. He said he'd give me $50,000, and that meant I was on my way, you see?
Right, because then other people would join in.
I took that money to another producer, and he bought out the $50,000 guy, and he put more money. Like maybe we made it for $300.
Wendigo was only made for $300
on film.
Okay, yeah.
With those wonderful actors.
Oh, Patricia Clarkson. Who was the guy who played the lover up in the
Jake Weber.
Yeah, right.
Wonderful actor.
Yeah,
and John Sparadakis, who I've worked with ever since, and then of course the kid.
Great sex scene. Not to be tawdry but I like that you have sex in your movies. Sex is a great part of life, and also the anxiety that goes with sex.
I
think there's a lot of horror tied into that. I think sex and horror are all
they're having
very
a great
connected.
sex scene, and then you see the guys peeking in the window. So it's a very creepy resolve.
Absolutely.
But the good thing about that sex scene is that the act, once again, all very respectful. We knew what the agenda was, to make something that was sexy on screen, but we're not being lascivious. And Patty was very shy. She's like, I'm a good Catholic girl. And so, it took a little coaxing, but I think there was a cone of trust. And that's how I approach sex in movies. And I haven't worked yet with an intimacy counselor, and though I'm not unwilling because you have a stunt coordinator for things, in a weird way, I also am resistant because it turns it into a bit of a bureaucracy. I mean, I want to be able to have an intimate conversation with my actors, and I'd done a lot of sex scenes and nude scenes for some reason. I mean, well past wanting to photograph this old body. I'm naked in a tub in Ty West's Western, get killed by Ethan Hawke. But the point is it's just...
Do you full frontal in that movie? Do you show your everything?
No, not really.
Would you do full frontal if you had a chance?
Well, I'll do what's required, because I also, and once again, this is not because I'm a, what is it called?
Prude?
No, an exhibitionist, but I just believe in the mission that if it's for the right reasons, that everything should be in the arts.
And
absolutely. This is actually, I believe it's strong. Also, I came from the performance art scene, and there was nudity and celebration and all manner of fluidity and sexuality. This was a celebration of who we are, our physical lives, our spiritual lives. This is a whole point. This is what horror is, because it confronts the reality of life, which is life and death and sex and and spirituality
and the messiness of life
and messiness. Exactly.
Without a doubt. All of that. So then, and the last winter was after that. That was a higher budget.
That
right?
was almost $4 million.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so we partnered with Alaska. I'm sorry. Good Lord, forgive me, Alaska. No, forgive me, Iceland. We partnered with Iceland.
Oh, did you shoot in Iceland?
Yes, which was fantastic. It was playing as Alaska, but we shot in Iceland. That was the same producer, Jeff Levy-Hinty. Jeff Kusama now of Wendigo, and we sold out. The numbers eventually made sense, but it was a tough sell. It's sort of appreciated now. I just got a call from Canal Plus. Can they, use clips of it? Because of course it's about climate change, which is not like it was resolved.
Yeah, no, of course.
So the movie will remain a touchstone of that genre, which is unfortunately a very small genre. The climate change picture.
Yeah, right.
There's a reason for that.
Do you feel like you're addicted to filmmaking? And I'm like, because you were talking about the addiction of like blood and vampires and whatnot. I feel like the first time I made a movie, I was bitten by something, and I had the curse of it, and I couldn't. And it was a beautiful thing, but it was also a curse because it takes up so much of my time, so much of my life. I think to myself, I don't want to do this anymore. It's too hard. I'm tired of not getting reviewed. I'm not tired of not making money. I'm tired of not getting my investors or money back. It's too much of a slog. I'm done. But then I just want to do it all over again because I love it so much. Do you feel that, what else would you be able to do? What else would you want to do? And it is about being passionate and driven, right?
Well, I'd like to make furniture, which I do.
Is that true?
No, I'm kidding on the one hand, but no, I just like making things and having an idea and then following it through, and I play the saxophone. In other words, what I'm really saying is that everything I do has the same quality, which is a sort of a roughness. There's an impulsiveness to it. It hopefully has other dimensions, but there's a ragged edge, and I believe in that kind of mediocrity. There's other types of great filmmakers who are precise, much more brilliant than me. So whatever, I'm engaged in that dialogue, which has to do with control versus letting fate come in. This is why I believe in nature, and so anyway, that's who I am. Film is my favorite medium because you have all the things. You have the music, you have the sound effects, presumably performance, and the whole idea of the camera telling the story is so seductive to me. Last night, what did I do? We just made a music video. We drove all around the city. Cost nothing. Who'd you
do this
Well,
with?
I won't get into it, but we had a great rapper named Darkwell, and we just went, this is a song that's in my son's film, and I said, well, we'll put the song out, we'll have a video.
And put scenes from the movie into the video, too.
Maybe so, or maybe not. We'll see.
Yeah,
I think the video's going to stand on its own. And anyway, it's a song I really like, and it was so fun. And I just realized as I'm driving around, this is the addiction you're speaking of, because nobody needs this video, but it's going to be fun, and that's the idea.
Did you ever see that the last Orson Welles, one of the last movies he did, and there was the documentary behind it, and he's just in a car with Peter Bogdanovich and a bunch of other people, and it's just like an indie film set, like probably when you did Habit at times, there was probably just you and 3 other crew members on the street with a 16mm camera, right?
Absolutely, and I just love the idea of solving problems, making a choice that this is where the camera goes for a myriad of reasons. It has to do with what the shot before it is going to be. It has to do with the meaning of a wide shot, shooting from behind someone versus a profile. Profile is such a profound statement about a person, and so on and so on. These are these wonderful things to contemplate, and that's why I love Hitchcock, because he spoke so clearly about the language of film, and you can read his movies in a way that gives you access to the process, and then you may digress from that. Maybe they're too mannered for you. All that's possible, but the point is it's a language, and I'm going in there making similar decisions to Scorsese. He may make better decisions. He may be better financed.
Well, he has way better finance, and he has way more time. At the end of the day, it's about time.
That's right. But the point is we're engaged in the same ritual and process, and that's to me delicious, and it does make you connected in some way to the greats.
Absolutely. What draws me to Habit is it's got so much real estate. There's so much going on in it for a low budget movie. There's so many locations, so many shots, so much coverage and whatnot. But again, it's sloppy. It's a shaggy movie, which I love. Are you drawn to, or if you had the time and money, would you want to make something technically precise, really beautiful? And you have made some technically precise and organic movies. I mean, and technically efficient. I mean, all your movies are well made. There's no doubt about that, and well acted. At the end of the day, the difference between an amateur and a great director is acting. I mean, if your acting is not good, it's a fight. But are you drawn to technical aspects of films, like a beautifully made movie that's visually amazing but vacuous script-wise? Would you rather watch a tiny budgeted movie like Chuck and Buck that's made for $500,000 or $700,000 shot on a little digital camera, or a $40 million action film that's beautifully shot and that costs so much money to make? What would you rather watch? I mean, what are you more drawn to or interested in? Or
well, every movie they're decisions that are being made, and maybe they're being done more in a computer than so I always defend, Tom Cruise. These people are masters of their craft, and their craft is massive. It doesn't mean that is life affirming to watch. So you're almost watching something else. You're watching the mechanics of, oh wow, well
machine,
but that is not to shake a stick at. And then there's someone in the middle, like Tarantino, the horse scene in Django. Those horses, they trained for a year to go down the hill because horses don't like going down a hill. Now that's fucking beautiful. That is a commitment. The way he shot his, and I'm not a Tarantino fan, but his recent movies are impressive. There's a lot of money being spent, but it's being spent intelligently and with great passion for things that matter to me, like the tactile nature of things. Like he changed Sunset Strip or whatever it is in L.A. For his period piece, and he really went through the details, and that means an art department was engaged in the right things.
Absolutely.
So all of that matters to me, but then I love Chuck and Buck, and I actually predict. I'm going to make a prediction. I don't know when this will come out, but I feel like indie films, low-budget films, they still have a chance, even though we're seeing Hollywood canonize, the Marvel universe and so on. But there's something you can connect to in a low-budget film, and maybe one with a couple of rough edges. I think that still has a vitality. People are excited by that. Now, then we have the attention span problem, and then you get into a bigger problem of the mental landscape of our culture, and I don't know what to say about that.
Contradictory to me. Sometimes it's like, people don't have attention spans because it's an Instagram feed and nobody's reading articles or books and whatnot. But then it's like, okay, but people still have the attention span to watch a 10-hour series I feel like could have been a good movie, but
so
instead
profound.
it's this laborious TV show that I don't want to watch anymore. So it's like, I can't tell. We have either not enough attention or too much of attention. Where's give me 90 minutes to 2 hours just to watch a good movie. That's all I ask,
Oh my God. Now it's just an interview between two old grumpy cinema files, because I agree with you.
Yeah.
I'm always like, why are we doing 10 hours with this story? I would love to see this. And I used Fargo as an example because Fargo is a very good TV show and had many iterations and blah, blah, blah. But you know what? I lost the thread. Give me that movie. I'll watch it anytime, over and over. So precise. I mean, whatever you think of Fargo, it's just this gem, and then the TV show, intelligently made, some really cool shots. You could even say it's cinematic, and yet I'm prattling on.
No, it's beautiful. Okay, speaking of old dudes and grumpy old dudes, and maybe who are out of touch or whatnot, which we're all fearing that and whatnot. Do you think Habit, being a man in his late 20s, having an existential crisis, do you think 25 years later we can look at him and say, what was really wrong? Are his problems that great? And did he manifest them all? Because it could be the woman and the vampirism. It could all be in his imagination, right?
Sure.
It's kind of what is posited, which is beautiful and been handled very well. Do you feel like in 25 years, what's he so anxious about? What is his problem? Can we look at him and say, he's dealing with it, or can we have sympathy for him? Or it's just like, he's just a white guy with not that much to deal with. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
But see, that's the point. It's not that he's a white guy. He's an individual, and his story represents something that all of us go through, which is a loneliness, and he calls out in a moment of need to his very best friend. Now, you watch the movie, and you could say his best friend is white, so I don't care about a white person's problem, but that's not what the movie's about. It's about his best friend. Insert anyone you want. I mean, you should be able to watch. When I watch movies with black people, I'm not going, I can't relate to this. I'm looking at their dilemma. Moonstruck is one of my favorite movies. I guess that's about black people, but it's about that kid. And so I don't actually buy into this identity. I'm sorry, this is going to...
Moonstruck, not Moonstruck. What movie is it?
What's it called? Moonlight?
Moonlight, yeah. Yeah.
But Moonstruck also. I don't care. There's a bunch of Italians.
Yeah, no,
they've got problems. That's the point. Maybe
yeah.
there was a perfect Freudian slip. Moonlight. So I resist the idea that everything is that I want to see a story just about myself.
Yeah,
I want to see a story. I'm more interested in themes, actually, than the specifics of a story. And in my case, with Habit, it seems to me about somebody who's losing his way. He can't tell what reality is, which is a fear that I think a lot of us have. Now, having said all that, it's also a movie about, quote, mental health. And that's very much on people's minds right now as they lose a grip with reality. I would argue that the problem in the world now is that we all have different senses of what's true. And once again, that's been commodified by the media. They're preying on this. And so habit is prescient. And so is Wendigo. That's about blue state, red state problems, and the resentments that build. And they go all the way back to the the slaughter of the Native Americans. That's what Wendigo's engaged with, but it's still just a little white family. But I'm sorry, it's about more. And I think good movies are about more, and that you can extrapolate the storyline and see the truisms that we all share. I mean, that's why they're engaging. It seems to me why a movie is worth seeing. So whatever.
I'm listening. I'm just checking this thing again just
to
make sure. Can we keep going?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, beautiful, great. This is going good.
I mean, you're going to need a two-disc box set.
No, this is going to be great. Okay, so all right. So let me ask you a question. Do you think that as you get older now, has your anxiety you found a way to manage it? Let me ask you this. In the 90s, the movie is about drinking, maybe habit a little bit. I feel like I've gone through a point in my life where I'm trying to drink less. Did you ever have a problem with drinking? Do you ever feel like it got out of control? The movie is about drinking to a lot of degree. Do you feel like, in a way? I remember you telling me that once. It's a metaphor maybe for
I don't
alcoholism.
think that's a secret. It is about drinking. He's drinking in the first shot and to the end.
Did you have problems with it back then? Do you have problems with it now?
I have no problem drinking.
do you drink as much as you did? Do you ever feel like there was an issue, like it was too problematic and whatnot?
Well, sure. It's a portrait of an alcoholic, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, and all the slippery. I mean, let's be candid. Once again, I find candor to be the true offering of an artist. So I'm going to say it's a self-portrait about an alcoholic, and what are the ramifications that you don't trust other people because you're obviously something's wrong with yourself. And the movie deals with his sense of despair and disconnection from his dad, which the dad is simply a figure. I mean, we're talking about the patriarch, you see. That's the other thing. I always have fathers in my movies. It's not because I had an issue with my dad, who was a very sweet man, is a sweet man, but it's because I'm talking about the patriarch and the fact that we are living with the sins and the haunted quality of our past, and we have to deal with our history and whether humankind has made the right choices to get us where we are, you see. So we're all haunted by that, and some of us drink to sort of suppress the despair. So that's a movie about despair, in fact. And his friend says, your father died, you broke up with your girlfriend, you're falling apart. Well, your only friend is alcohol. And then the joke is the guy says, well, I quit drinking. I have to quit drinking. And he goes, well, we should get a drink. So you just see the inability for these two people to connect and the crutches that they have. I would argue that their real friendship is their drinking buddies. So it's just a critique of, but I'm not condemning alcoholism. I'm portraying it. I'm saying this is the reality in some people's lives, and in Sam's case, the character, he ends up dead on the ground. So it didn't go well for him.
Have you ever contemplated suicide or anything like that? Has that ever popped in your head? Was there a period so dark where you thought, I can't do it anymore?
Well, look, it's in the movie. He says, I'm committing suicide on the installment plan.
Yeah, sure.
And
absolutely. Great line. Love
that's
that
a real
line.
truth. What is an alcoholic actually doing? And what is humanity doing? We're committing suicide. That climate change has been known about since the 50s. Actually, it was discovered in the 1920s because the combustible engine had been around, and somebody said, this is interesting. The CO2 is actually, blah, blah, blah. So here we are. This is 100 years later, and nobody will face it. So my movie isn't about alcoholism. It's about climate change. That's what I say. The whole point is that I'm obsessed with the inability of humanity to sort of get their house in order, and it's a personal critique, and it's a critique of our society and Western culture. But then I'm like, it's not Western culture. It's humans. Yeah. It's animals. So it's a disaster, and one which we're supposed to be able to transcend and be better and create an ideal society. This would be the challenge. The only reason you complain about humanity is to say, well, why can't we do it this way? And there's books and books of solutions and proposals. And I read them all, and now I'm just in a place you talk about being an old man, where I'm like, I don't think anybody fucking cares
Yeah.
to make a solution. I
yeah.
don't even see it in the national conversation. We are literally delighting in the fact that we're heading to a civil war. It's like every side is like, the other side is so awful. And it's like, okay, so you've just decided not to try to get along and have solutions. You're just like gleefully going for this and twittering your way to annihilation. Okay.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So fuck that. And unfortunately, I do have a son, so it matters to me.
yeah.
Otherwise, I couldn't fucking care less.
I love it. I mean, would you consider yourself an angry person? From what I know, it doesn't seem like. But like artists are angry. They need to get their anger out. Like you can use art is a way to use your anxiety and your anger and put it into something, right? Do you feel like that is
passion?
Yeah.
And art is also about controlling the things that are uncontrollable. And so you set up shots. And even if you're telling a violent story, sort of categorizing it in a way and contextualize, you're putting your spin on it, and then you can say, well, that's what I have to say about something. I mean, so am I angry? I love getting riled up, but in the end, I'm more of a peacemaker as a personality, and I dislike conflict, but I also feel like, come on, let's call a spade a spade. So it's a little, I don't know, whatever. You can analyze me all you want. I never went to a shrink.
One of the, you never did therapy, right? Never did. No. Is that not part of your family and that kind of stuff?
Not really. This is my therapy. The movies.
Yeah,
the movies
for sure.
is
And
the
horror
therapy.
and whatnot and creation.
Yeah.
The movie. So what's interesting about Habit, as far as I can remember, is the main character never bites. I don't want to spoil anything, but he never bites anyone, does he?
The dude?
Yeah. Does he ever kill anyone? I can't remember.
No.
He doesn't.
Well,
he's bit. He deteriorates. Does he bite? Does he kill anyone? I can't remember.
Absolutely not.
He doesn't.
And furthermore, he's seen. I implicate him because he's got a knife that he carries with him all the time, which I still do. And he breaks into his girlfriend's apartment, and then the neighbor, which is a very sort of Polanski kind of vibe, is sort of saying, "There's somebody in that room, and I heard noises." And then he looks in the mirror. And he's covered in blood because he discovered her, but he's also got the knife in his hand.
Yeah.
So that's the one time he's implicated.
Oh, but he's killing the person who bit him. He kills the woman who bit him, right?
No. He kills his old girlfriend.
His old girlfriend, that's
right. He
right.
goes over to say, I'm in trouble, and then he breaks into her room because she doesn't answer the door, and she's lying dead on the ground. Now, we imply that Anna has overheard the conversation and is annoyed at the girlfriend.
And killed her ahead of time,
But then he is implicated, and now he's on the run, literally. He jumps on the subway, and the old gals look at him like, what the hell?
Yeah,
on it goes. It's a very specific effort at creating ambiguity. That was the point of the movie.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah. Was it shot the way it was scripted, or as you were going, like you were inventing new ideas and shooting new things and kind of figuring out as you went and letting it be kind of this weird tapestry of vignettes and weird imagery, or did you?
No, it's very precisely
precisely scripted.
The script
right?
is almost the same. In fact, it was too long. Well, it was 120 pages, which is a mistake. If you're a visualist, your script should be 89 pages. Because I had to cut like 45 minutes. Yeah. A lot of it was sort of redundant, I guess. People chatting and this and that, but so no, I people, and it's a great compliment. People think it's improvised. It's not at all. It's precise. And I've never really for all we've talked about the shaggy kind of filmmaking, I'm very much Hitchcock.
Yeah.
It's shot to shot. In fact, sometimes I have conflict with my DP if they start getting too feisty with the suggestions, because I'm like, I know we could start with a wide shot. It's a great idea, except we just ended on a wide, so I precisely want to start on the door handle here, because I've got the whole movie in my mind. So please stop distracting me with just random ideas. So in a way, I'm actually extremely controlling. And the movies maybe are too ambitious. They get away from me or whatever. If the edit looks in any way shaggy, it's because there's much more going on in the process. It's one reason I love Scorsese, because he does crazy dissolves and stuff, and you realize, oh my God, Marty, you just, you were in the edit room and you wanted one part of the shot and then De Niro smoking, so you just dissolved, and you feel the process and you feel the excitement in the edit. And that's, very different from Kubrick or whoever. Everybody's a little different, and each one is nourishing if you feel their engagement.
I think about the idea of like getting older, being afraid of death. Are you afraid to die? By the way, are you afraid of it?
I'm afraid of like violence and decay and health collapse. So yeah, I guess I'm obsessed with death all my life. Like Woody Allen. I mean, sort of
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
cliche. I think if you're a sentient creature and yeah, and I have no solace that God will be up there with the pillow. But I don't find any problem with being eaten by worms. That's not offensive to me. I'm delighted to go back to the earth. So I'm not afraid of certain parts of death, but the other thing is just the end of consciousness. You can go down a rabbit hole thinking about that. Because when we talk about death, we're sort of saying you're perceiving yourself as no longer existing, but you're still perceiving it. But actually, if you are no longer existing, that seems scary.
Yeah, no, interesting. Yeah, no, of course, without a doubt. So this idea of getting you were, by the way, think you were about fear of violence and whatnot. You were attacked once, right? In the '80s, where did you lose your tooth by getting attacked? Have you told me that once? Will you
Yeah.
tell me what happened? What happened? Did you get your ass kicked somewhere? What happened?
Oh no, it was much more random. It was just I was
What year was this?
82 or
You don't talk about any of this shit. You don't want
83
to.
or something.
83. Okay, you were a teenager, high school, in middle school, high school.
Well, I had a French girlfriend, and we were leaving a party where I had shown some movies, and I always had them with a Super 8 projector and a boogie box. And we were just crossing the street outside of the Brooklyn Museum at night, and she was carrying the boogie box. And this gang of kids, I mean, they were almost like they were young teenagers anyway. And they just thought it would be funny to sort of grab the boogie box and grab the girl and just kind of hassle us. It was not premeditated. I don't even think there was no malice. But I turned around and I said, "Hey, guys, what the hell?" And I grabbed the girl and the boogie box, and one of the guys just kicked me in the face. So it was so random. I mean, that could have just been...
kick like that, just
Yeah.
up like karate kick.
Yeah, but I mean, it could have just been like, "Oh, fuck you."
But it hit you in the exact right spot.
Exactly. The tooth went flying out.
Holy shit, just like that.
Yeah. So I had to drink out of a straw for the next couple hours. It was terrible.
Oh my god, did they run off or did
Yeah,
you?
they ran off.
and
They were
ran
freaked
off?
out. That was not their plan for the night either. And then we got in a taxi actually, and the cabbie was like, "I'll find them," and it was all like, "No,
Yeah.
we're fine, dude." Anyway, the tooth was so shattered that the dentist said, "We got to pull out the root and start over." And then I just said, "I don't want to get into drilling because I'm afraid of unnecessary medical
Sure,
treatment."
no, of course, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Were you traumatized by it? You feel like it was trauma, or you feel like it was just almost in a way, just like it was just unfortunate that the kick didn't hit you, graze your chin, as opposed to hitting you right exactly in the foot, right?
I have
It wasn't like that. I was assuming you got pummeled by a bunch of dudes.
No, nothing
nothing
like
like that, right?
No. I mean, look, I think trauma is part of life, and I try to process it as quickly as possible because, and just, it becomes part of your history. And I mean, that happens with every little slight. Yeah.
A friend of mine once said that, because I asked him about the apocalypse. Like, "Do you think the apocalypse is real? Do you have any belief?" He's like, "We're all going to have our own apocalypse one day. Everyone's going to go through, or many apocalypses." Are you a spiritual man at all, or just a complete pagan, just believe in the earth, or do you believe in some kind of higher power and stuff? If you can say fuck that question and fuck you for asking, and I don't believe in shit, go fuck your mother.
No, and don't fuck your mother.
I'm
No.
kidding. No, I'm joking. My mother's
No.
dead. It's not. Oh yeah.
Well, she's looking down.
Are you proud
According
of
to
me,
my
Mom?
beliefs, she's looking down at you. It's funny, even the way you phrase it. I think I don't think of spirituality as being in a book written by some old dudes.
Mm-hmm.
Nor is it even in the Buddhist tradition, though I would sort of lean towards people who are embracing sort of the minutia of life and the nuance of interacting with a bigger thing. I think the constructed religions of the world are deeply narcissistic because they sort of have to create a construct where there's somebody, with a big power. So it's really just creating daddy figures. I mean, sometimes mother figures, but it all seems like completely the wrong approach. And this is why, oddly enough, I always make movies about Native Americans, because their relationship, when they talk about the river, and it has a spiritual presence, but it's not a bunch of hokum. It's that the river provides sustenance, and it has this certain behaviors, and you have to listen to it. So that's what I mean, look, I'm not a camper. I don't go hiking. You know, I stay in my house and Twitter on the machine. But I don't Twitter. I mean, I twiddle. Yeah. But I think that is your agenda, to engage with fate and the greater realities. And I find a religious conversation ingenuine, almost always.
Yeah, no,
and it's
sure.
used now as a club. And like, our religion requires you to do these things, and that's where you know this is just another construct, and it has nothing to do with real deference and humility, which are qualities I find most interesting.
Do you feel? I feel like the thing about vampires too is what you do. I always found the idea of immortality really interesting. As someone who is afraid of death, who doesn't want to die. Some days I do. Some days it's not that I want to die. Some days I'm okay with it. I can tell where my state of my mind is when I fly somewhere. Like, if I'm not afraid to fly on that particular day or that week, I'm like, okay, obviously I don't care if I die or not. If I am afraid, I'm like, I'm excited about the future, excited about the projects that I've got going on, and I want to see them through. That's one of my biggest fears, is not finishing some of the things I've started. I want to see these projects finished, whatever. And that's what I think. But the idea of immortality that's what is intriguing for vampires to me, is the idea you can't die. But it's what's interesting, because you subvert that in your movie, because your movie is about, after he gets bitten, instead of being immortal, he's on the path to death in a strange way. I don't know. I mean, like, again, is it come from a hypochondriacal place, or what do you think? I mean, were you? I haven't yet to make my fear of true fear of death film, or really addressing my hypochondriacal issues. But I mean, again, you're taking your anxieties and you're putting them into a movie. I don't know. Do you want to discuss that or talk about that? I don't have a specific question. I hate it when people do that. Like, talk about this. Makes you do all the work.
Well,
basically.
I think what's fun about this conversation is that your questions are as rich as any answer I'll give, because everything you said I agree with. I hate flying, and everybody knows it. Once again, I make my fear known. I say it in my interviews because I think it's a little window on a personality, just as you've shared that with me. But what I thought you said that was interesting was the nuance between, if you feel your affairs are settled, you're like, okay,
yeah.
If this is the one, so be it.
Yeah.
But if you're not finished your edit, if you have an unfinished bit of business with an argument with someone, then you're very unsettled because you're not ready.
Yeah.
So there is a difference between being ready, even though you don't want to personally die at that moment, but you're like, I'm settled. My affairs are, in order. And I think that really is a subtle but interesting difference. Meanwhile, just everyone says you're afraid of flying, and I'm like, no, I'm afraid of crashing.
Yeah,
actually, I have no problem with flying.
Yeah,
if I was sure it was going to work, it's fantastic. Very, very quick, speedy way to get there.
Yeah.
But then you spoke about other things. Well, I'm a hypochondriac too. Has that even been clear? We've talked about fear of death, but that's so vague. I mean, every day talk about COVID. Like, every day I think I have the COVID. So there's all of that kind of thing. There's just fear of diminishment and weakness and all those things that'll come with the big. I mean, literally since I was 18. I'll wake up at night, almost every night, and think, this is it, the heart, do I call? Mm-hmm. So, that's a pretty ongoing thing. And the irony is that's probably wearing down my system, that level of paranoia. So that's a real, if you had to write the bio, no one would want to read that. But that's like one of the things I deal with every day. Mm-hmm. So not a day goes by when I'm just like peachy keen. I'm always aware of but in a weird way, then you say spiritual. Well, it means I'm pretty attuned to the gift of life. I'm aware that that's a gift, and today it's a gift. And if I feel okay, wow, even better. So I'm not saying it's all bad. It's an awareness. Yeah. But it can be debilitating, or at least so there's that. But then you also spoke, I was just going to celebrate. I made the movie Habit twice, and I always have said I'll make it 3 times in the spirit of 28 Up or Boyhood, movies that deal with time. And what's interesting is that while the middle one, let's say the one you're familiar with, is about sort of sexual addiction and alcoholism and all of that, the next one would be about death, of course, because he would start thinking, oh wow, so I'm heading towards the end. Yeah. This vampire thing, whatever about the sex addiction, we'll get that on the side, I hope, but I wonder if there's any hope to cheat death. So that would be the theme of the third one, if I were to make it. And I have, I've written the outline and everything, but then I got to lose the weight. Otherwise, who's going to watch this picture?
That's not true. Okay. Also, well, do you think, it is a Faustian bargain. Like the idea of living, that you have your own curse of living for eternity, like not being able to die, knowing you couldn't die. Would you take it if you could become a vampire and live forever? Or do you think, I'll take it, I just die like the rest of us and age like the rest of us? Or would you take it and stay on Earth and not age and
No.
be a vampire? Would you take that? Would you do that if you had to? I know it's a stupid hypothetical, but like,
Well, it's fun to ask these questions, just like it's fun to make vampire movies. Much more fun than making movies about mental health. That's the basic fundamental thing here that I think we also share is like. So let's ask that question, just because it leads to a more true answer. I think
well, I guess a more modern question could be too: if you're on your deathbed and they have a chance to upload your mind to like a singularity type fucking. That's a stupid question too, but it's
no,
like
that's different though. Because,
yeah, sure, I guess you're right.
Because that
you
implies
have to
that
feed.
my mind is so entertaining to me, but it's actually my mind in this corporeal form that I find, the only good part of
that we can
living.
engage and
Yeah,
live.
yeah. I wouldn't
and
just want to have my little brain, which is mostly concerned with trivial, silly, petty things.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want
yeah.
that in a computer, just like so. Fuck that. No, let's keep it corporeal. No, I don't think I'd want to live forever. I would love to avoid the decay that is implied by old age, but that's possible. And I'm not saying by suicide, but I'm saying, you can sort of sit around and hope. There's a great Tom Waits song, Everybody Wants to Know How It's Going to End. It's kind of true, whether you draw attention to that or not. It's still kind of true. You're sort of wondering. And then, is it going to be the plane crash? Which I think would be devastating. Remember, we talked about unfinished business, but there's the unfinished business as you're dying. Can you be at peace with... I just find it very violent. I find flying sort of presumptuous, like humanity's just decided we can fly everywhere, and that's why when they say we're going to colonize Mars, I'm saying, that's fantastic. You guys go. By all means, please, and do right. But I'm staying here.
And that's why... downsizing your judgment of that as well.
It annoys me about the climate change. It's like... we can't escape from this. I like the planet the way it was.
Yeah.
You're fucking it up. I mean, that's even already true. It's just not the same. You notice the weather's mean now, and it's just a disaster.
So don't you think it has to be way more extreme? Where there has to be not just one Category 5 tornado in Middle America, but like 10 happening at the same time. Not just one forest fire raging in the west, but like 20 happening one time. Not just a flood line being coasted twice a year in the Gulf and in Florida, but like in the Panhandle, but like New York being absolutely flooded at the same time. That's the only thing that's going to make us really wake up and say, okay, things are real now, right? Like I feel like that's what has to happen.
But it is happening because they were saying, this would never happen. Well, it's happening. But yes, it's happening in slow enough motion that we can worry about, Frank Langella being canceled instead. That's a much easier thing to gossip about. Or the fucking Johnny Depp trial. This is what people want to talk about.
Of course.
They don't want to talk about something where they're implicated. I mean, that's what,
I was just thinking about Broadway. No one ever talks about Broadway and the brilliance of Broadway, but then they talked about it yesterday in the news clip because somebody's got nude, like one of these famous hot Broadway actors got nude on stage, and that's what everyone was talking because the photo was leaked. I mean, that's where, if you think about that, you have enough not healthy, but maybe it is healthy, misanthropy towards the people that most people are idiots and we're not worth saving. That, I mean, you want to save your son, you want the world to continue with your son, but at the same time, it's like, why lament the end of human civilization? The earth will bounce back. Why even save us? Why do we want to save ourselves? Like, let us die off so the world can thrive without us.
I do. I mean, I have books called, The World Without Us, and their contemplations of how quickly the world will bounce back.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always said, don't call me a tree hugger. I'm the last guy trying to defend humanity because the earth is going to be fine. Having said that, I do lament the earth we're creating, which is cockroaches and droughts versus, verdant forests and elephants. So there is a middle ground. On the way to the extinction of humanity is this sad place where the place is a dump. Mm-hmm. And it's possible because if you look at our cities, you look at anything, there's a lot of tendency towards disorder and chaos. And trash piled up and all the rest. So that is humanity, just slobs.
I don't have kids. I'm afraid of kids. I want to make a body of work. You've made a body of work, but you also have a kid. What do you think was more important to you? Do you feel like you had a kid to achieve? I mean, making movies is like a form of immortality. Leaving something behind after you die that people will watch and enjoy. Having a kid at the same time, passing your DNA along. Was that important to you? Is that one of the reasons why you had a son or child? Is I need to find, as far as I know, the only absolute I can tell is I can continue my bloodline, my DNA by having a child. Was that important? Just the legacy of Larry Fessenden to keep going?
Not in the slightest.
It was an accident.
Well, I think we decided as a couple to like let's do this, and I will say this about it's mind expanding and emotionally this and that, and so it's another activity, but it wasn't for my ego, and in a weird way. I'm obsessed with my body of work in terms of like this connects to that, this person worked here and then that, but that's all just kind of, I like the web of associations and the pursuit of themes and all of that. So that's all very satisfying to me in the same way that I'll organize a room or I like to cook. But it's not that I'm like, oh, good, people will be talking about me in 50 years. Who cares?
Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I do think about my legacy in terms of like, so Val Luton. Okay, so he was a producer who made, I don't know, 12 movies that we talk about still, but he gets a little box set. So I like things like that. They sort of categorize. I like series of things. And I'm not an egotist, but there's also, I think that subversion of the ego is one of the missions in life, and that's actually how you accept death, because you're only worried about death if you think of like yourself. But if you can, and this is back to more indigenous way of thinking, if you just see yourself as part of a web of life, you can sort of let go. And in a way, I think your journey is to accept death. So you get to the door and you're like, this is all good. I've thought about this enough that I'm okay here. So blah, blah, blah. And, a lot of ghost stories, let's face it, are about the interrupted life, the unfortunate death that is not resolved. So I think those are really interesting things to contemplate. Doesn't mean I believe in ghosts, but I would never say I don't believe in ghosts, because I'm like, I'll allow that. I also think we are all deeply haunted by everything from the choice we made when we got up this morning to the deeper things, the people we betrayed and left behind and so on.
Absolutely. I think about like the idea of like the at least in my short lifespan I'm going to be 50, but I think about the last 20 years. It's the 20-year anniversary of the Iraq War coming up, like next year, next March will be the 20 years when we started the invasion of Iraq, and I think about the sins of America, at least contemporary sins, of the media and so many people on the left and the right who were complicit in saying, let's just bomb a nation of brown people that had nothing to do with 9/11, and just basically for their oil. And I'm feeling like inspired to do something, because we're in this place of like, canceling people for aggressions that are just like part of human nature. But it's like, why don't we just remember something? Why don't we we should cancel, if we're going to talk about cancel and sins of the past, I feel like we need to be reminded of that,
I agree.
And I
haven't figured out
how I'm going to do it yet, or what I'm going to do, but it's like, okay, because it's great. Blame the white man for past grievances, and we should, because white patriarchy is a terrible thing. But I feel like 20 years ago it was a very collective thing where Americans were united for a common good, which is actually a horrible thing. And I just think it's interesting to remind everybody of that. We were all united there for a little while to do something horrible.
I agree.
Can we keep going, or you're ready to stop? Can we stop whenever you're ready? We probably should stop in another 10 minutes. Another 10.
That's fine. I also don't want to bore the viewer. I don't know.
Oh God, yeah, I love this. I'm self-serving. This is for me. It is for the viewer. It's going to be on the Blu-ray, and I'll give you the whole interview, by the way, so you can have it. You can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
But it's just but it's going to be on the Blu-ray.
Well, it's fun to talk. And I do feel like these issues are important, and that I have always known that about you, that this is really where you come from. Yeah. Which is, it's in your work, and in a way, your enthusiasm for Habit speaks to something, because not everybody cares about that movie.
But there are lots of fans. A lot of people care about that movie, but also it's just so much interesting, fascinating. It's also about a guy who's almost a self-sabotage and and destroying himself. He has so much to live for in a lot of ways. He's intelligent, he's charming, he's great, but it's like, what's the problem? Why does he, again, because we're all going through this kind of thing.
Yeah.
He does, these are, I'm going to ask stupid questions, just rapid fire. He does jump out of a window at the end, kill himself. Maybe he's escaping something, maybe he's trying to die, maybe he wants to die. If you had to kill, if you were going to, this is a fucking dark question, but if you were going to kill yourself, how do you think you would do it?
I don't know the answer to that, and I have enough superstition that maybe I'm not going to.
Oh, because you feel like, yeah, you can invite that into your world.
Yeah, I mean, I am superstitious.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's a kind of a spiritual thing.
Yeah, and actually,
I didn't walk. There was a ladder the other day. Fucking walked right around it. It was in the middle of the fucking street. I walked right around.
Well, the irony is, I do that because I always picture like the news story that says, woman crane fell on woman, yeah. And I'm like, am I really going to even allow that possibility? Because I'm very obsessed with arbitrary violence, and I'm obsessed with So there's nothing that doesn't trouble me.
For sure.
I used to, when I was a kid, I'd walk by just even a gate with the spikes, and I would just picture the impalement, which is funny. It's in the Hitchcock movie with Ingrid Bergman and Gregory Peck. Not a good movie, but fun because of the dream scene. Anyway, but on set, and it's almost to the point where they gave me a little wooden block. I always knock on wood. I knock on wood for I'll say, well, that certainly won't happen. Yeah, and then I'm like, but you know why? It's because when the plane's going down, I don't want that to be the last thing I hear, that the words coming back on myself. And it really goes to all my pathologies. For example, in habit, I lick the plate, which I still do. I always say, I don't want to be in the lifeboat and say, I never fucking finished that fucking meal.
Yeah.
I want to be, I ate every bit of food that was offered me. So as I starve now, I'm at peace. So it's all that idea.
Interesting. You still do that?
I do it all the time. Well, first of all, it tastes yummy. But it's all about sort of keeping this bargain with God. I made the joke earlier. I quit smoking at 40. And I just said to God, who's maybe not up there, but I said, I'll let me quit. And then you give me a pass.
Wait, say that one more time. I'm sorry.
I quit smoking at 40. It was another sort of random bargain. So even though I'm not a religious man, I'm engaged in a dialogue with the fates, whatever they are. And but I think it comes back to oneself. I don't want to have the regret when it's over that I mishandled the gifts, the gift of life and the gift of whatever, even talent. I feel a certain obligation to try to deliver on my potential. And, it's part of the sadness and the struggle, realizing, I'm not really smart enough to make this movie better or whatever, or I'm impatient. I'm a very impatient filmmaker. Sometimes one of my movies, I didn't work hard enough on the last day. And because, we were winding down, we were waiting for night. I could have filled that afternoon with more vigor.
What movie was this?
Beneath,
right?
And it's like I had the underwater camera. Maybe I could have gone and filmed something. I don't know. But there was part of me. So I have limitations, and it's always a sort of a dance. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I celebrate those, and I feel like that's what I want to put out there is the slight limitation. I believe there's a relationship to failure as well, because I also think that not everybody can excel. So you don't want to create a society where we revere the top dogs so much that everyone else is left behind.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the right society. I think we should revere the attention to your own work. If you're the janitor but you do it well with grace, that should be revered and incidentally paid appropriately, so that we don't have such a, so then it gets into political stuff, because you're saying actually the whole society should be. There's a book on my shelf called Small is Beautiful. The guy said, E.F. Schumacher, in the 60s, these were all the tomes I read as a younger man. He said, give 12 people a shovel, not one guy who can drive the tractor.
Yeah.
Or the bulldozer. So, these are things that we don't even
Give
talk about
purpose
anymore.
And meaning, yeah.
Give purpose
of course,
and meaning.
They completely, like when we decided to farm everything out overseas for smaller.
Yeah, well, that's come home to roost
absolutely.
now. And then we're going to vote for Trump to make up for this
Yeah.
terrible decision that was made by the corridors of power with Clinton's approval. So
Yeah.
it's going to
People
come and
need
bite
purpose.
you in the ass.
You have to give people purpose. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, it's so much better than like so. If a small group of people can get richer, it's like
Yeah.
let people have jobs.
Absolutely.
And it cut into your bottom line. It's absurd. I mean, I'm a capitalist. We have to be capitalists to get money to make our movies, but it's like at the same time, responsible capitalism, compassionate
That's
capitalism.
the thing.
You know,
Capitalism also needs caps.
Yeah.
And you know it. Yeah, it's so that's been lost in the last 50 years since Reagan and maybe
I used
before.
to listen to all those TED Talks for a long time when they were the new thing, and it's like, oh, interesting, lots of smart people saying intelligent things, and then you realize a lot of them are just peddling a product, and then it's like, you know what, these TED Talks would be way more interesting if it was just the blue-collar janitor up there talking about, hey, this is how I live off of $1,500
Right.
a month with 2 kids, or put my kids through college making $40,000 a year. I love riding in taxi cabs because I like to have conversations with the drivers, because it's usually an immigrant who has 2 jobs, and they are so proud to do those jobs because
Right.
you know they have kids, and they are there for their kids. They are working hard for their kids, and they're happy to make the sacrifice. You know, and I always get so inspired, and it also makes me complain a lot less about my fucking stupid life. You know what
absolutely.
I mean?
And this is why I like indie films. Though I keep reminding people that a lot of people are employed by the big movies, so you know that's fine too. And people with real talent. So I don't, but I like the environment of the independent movie. I like the idea of mentorship, something that is also not sort of revered because you're now just supposed to go get your new job, and everything's so cutthroat. There's no sense of loyalty to a company, to a brand, to a to a boss, even because we're all at odds with each other. There's no sense that a boss has obligations to be nurturing and mindful of somebody's journey, somebody's trajectory. So these are all things that interest me, and it's exhausting to be in this particular culture where even the language of those ideas it's not entertained. So you feel like you have to sort of jumpstart or restart, and then you're called a boomer and an old timer and a groomer, and all. It's just so and I try to remind myself that every generation feels left out at a certain age, but then try to make art that's relevant. So these are all fine. This is every generation goes through it.
Yeah.
And one of the problems I think with this generation is they think that all of this is happening to them for the first time. They're experiencing prejudice, and as if it's never happened before, and so then they have a distorted sense of what's possible. And I think we have to anyway. I don't know.
Distorted actually because they're getting information from everywhere all at once, and it's just like, and they have the ability to post their opinions everywhere all at once. So it's like I feel like they're going through the same things, but it's just there's more of a self-important immediacy to it. Kronos, are you a fan of Kronos? Did you ever see Guillermo del Toro's Kronos? Did you like that fucking movie? I'm a big fan of that movie. But again, fighting age and whatnot. What is your okay? So I feel like you are. It's too bad you're not more prolific because you do need your money to pay people and get films made. I recently saw a short film that you did called Fever, which was fantastic, and that was probably made for very little money and a very small crew, like some of your other movies. Do you feel like, do you have, how many scripts right now? Are you writing anything now? What is your workflow? Do you try to write every day? Have you ever allowed yourself to say, you know what, I've been doing this for 25, 30 years, I am going to take a fucking break and step back and not work for a while and be okay with that?
Well, it's funny you say that. My idea of a break is wrapping up one project. Today, this very day, my son's film comes out called Foxhole.
Oh, nice.
And it was, 4 years we've been making it. And the thing is I don't just make the movies. I also design the posters. And even when I'm working with a company, I'm very mindful of how the trailer is made and, sometimes get into spats. And I'm not always right either, but I have my perspective. And more than anything, I just want to engage with people and say that somebody's watching what they're doing and that, we can do better. Because I believe I'm really a carny. I'm like an old showman, I described earlier in this lengthy interview that I self-distributed have it because no one would have it. And I was quite sure that it was worth putting out there. So I babysat that film for a whole year extra. So in answer to your question, the work isn't done until it's done, and then my idea of a break is simply to allow myself to then think about my own film, which is what I intend to do starting on Saturday.
So,
I will
okay.
finally, in a sense, start making the next movie. Now, it could take 3 months, which is what I'm hoping, or it could take, as Depraved took, 9 years.
Yeah.
But what
This is the Wolfman movie, I'm assuming that you're doing
That's
next?
correct, yes.
Great.
So we'll see. And, I'm not expecting anybody to come to my aid. I mean, I have some schemes, and I have like the tax incentive from Depraved is finally due after 3 years. I mean, there's all this shenanigans. You know it. You're an indie filmmaker.
Yeah.
But what I'm not going to do is knock at Hollywood's door for the next 9 years to make a fucking werewolf movie. I mean, that's ridiculous. So,
did you ever go that route? Did you? I mean, you must have been
No,
in
I
that
did.
route a
I
little
did.
bit, especially during the last winter and all that stuff.
well, the
right?
last winter was wonderful, and that was really well produced by a partner, Jeff Levy-Hinty.
How long after Wendigo? Wendigo was made for $350,000. You had some success with that movie, right?
Yeah.
How many years before the last winter?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know.
3 years,
But-
probably?
Well,
Yeah.
it seemed like longer. But, we were working on it right away. It was a sequel to Wendigo in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But 9/11 happened and a lot of other things, and my passion for climate change happened. And I don't mind if I'm working on a movie. It feels like I'm making the movie. I am making the movie.
Yeah.
I'm making choices. I'm getting into the mode. And what I'm saying is that leaving one project behind, especially the nudgy work, is very liberating. So I don't take a real vacation. I never have. The only time I did was when I had COVID, which was fantastic. For a week, I got up at 11 in the morning and I watched movies until 1 in the morning. And then I went to bed and I said, I have COVID, so I have to take care of myself. And it was fantastic.
Yeah.
I've never done that ever.
Do you think Phantom Thread? You ever see Paul Thomas Anderson's Phantom Thread? Did you ever see that movie about
I
it?
didn't.
It's a really great movie. It kind of it plays into this idea of a workaholic who can't stop working, but then when he gets sick, and this lover takes care of him, and it's like and he allows himself to be take care of it. And it's like, oh, I have a reprieve. I can't work, and this is great. I actually don't want to work.
That's right.
Which is really, I guess, there is the silver lining of getting sick if it's not fatal. You know what I mean? So, that's great.
right.
Do you still watch? Yeah.
But the irony is, everything I just described, I happen to be having a retrospective at MoMA.
Mm-hmm.
So, on the one hand, I couldn't go to the retrospective.
Oh, because you
on
had
the
COVID.
other hand, I felt like my work is still getting out there. In other words, I actually felt, that might have been as much the reason I could take a little break, because they were showing 30 movies I'd made over the last 30 years, and I was like, okay, I can rest on my laurels for a second. So maybe that was part of it. Well, I don't consider it a workaholic. I'm just an artist, which means I'll work till it's over. And that's it. With diminishing returns, very possibly, with less and less interest from the public. Oh, that's reasonable. That's why I said I could also make furniture, because it's the same sort of, you have an idea, and then what I do is I just start building it, so I don't ever measure properly, and it's always very embarrassing and humiliating, because it's kind of like nothing fits, but then something else comes of it, and then I make an object, and I have a relationship to it. Sometimes affection, and sometimes like, oh boy, but that's the same thing as making a movie, except the movie's so much more expensive and frustrating.
No,
But
for
it's
sure.
all the same.
Do you are you still passionate after all these years?
Well, that's what I realized about shooting this video last night.
Yeah,
I'm a little lazier. Like, I like working with people and telling them what to do, like my cameraman. I used to really feel like camera work was one of the great art forms, because I like to do my own camera work.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I can't see right. Everything, my stuff is out of focus. So I still love the design of a camera, especially when you do it in the moment. That's why I love filming weddings. I filmed weddings for years, and I love filming performance art or stuff, and putting your own spin. In the moment, you're making the Hitchcock choices. And I did that with my son. That's how he learned to make films, because I'd say, go on, put on the cloak, run around with your friends, and I'll film it. And you'll see, at the end of this afternoon, we'll have a movie. And I think my
100%.
son saw, well, that's so cool. That that's cool, and that's why he sort of makes movies.
Again, it's like this sense of like not even though we're getting older and we're getting old, even it's like the sense of play, like making movies. I feel like it's still like make believe that we got to do. And I was talking about that with all the people on set. We're making a movie with 20 people, and it's like this is like make believe. I feel like I'm still in fucking elementary school, which is great.
Well, it's fun to be an actor because you get to.
Yeah.
I mean, you say where are all my movies, but it's because I do these other things, and it's great to be on a set and you're watching how they're making a movie, and there's this amazing camaraderie, which we all know. That's why we do it, and everyone contributing, and it's best when everybody's in a good zone, and you can see when it goes wrong. You're like, that's what I don't like about movies, and so that's why it's fun to be the boss, because you try to put the right spin on the process and make people feel appreciated and not abused. All the subtle things of getting a movie done, but with a good vibe.
Yeah, for sure. As I turn 50 this year, I think to myself, I'd like to think of the next chapter of my life. I hope to live to be 70, but will be 50 to 70. Not the last chapter. 50 to 70, still be prolific and still work, hopefully, if all goes well. And then maybe 70 after that. Maybe then it's like, if I'm lucky to get to that age, take the time off. So in this kind of chapter of your life, what would you rather, if you had the choice, would your legacy be more about acting or more about writing and directing or producing? What is the most important thing to you? In other words, would you rather, in the next 20 years, have 6 or 7 other feature films that you've directed under your belt? Or if you had the chance to be on the sequel to How I Met Your Mother and you were one of the fucking supporting actors on there for 10 years making millions of dollars, would you rather have How I Met Your Mother sequel being an actor on that, or six movies that you wrote and directed that are cool and people love and moderate success? You know what I mean? And I know it's not a binary choice because there's other iterations and other choices too. Right. But I'm just curious. No.
I want to make my own films. Yeah. Because I, oddly enough, I'm still really a philosopher. I'm trying to define how I think society should work. That's what motivates me in a weird way. I mean, of course I make movies about alcoholics and monsters and vampires, but I'm trying to sort out a way where I feel this is a blueprint for how society could work. And, it takes a lot of sacrifice, but it takes some rejiggering of the narratives that we work with. We talked briefly about, how we perceive success, things like that. And so in a weird way, I want to make a few more movies that reflect that, probably with monsters in them. And then I would like to write some sort of a book that basically just says what I did.
Memoir.
But how it relates, you see, to all these things. And why some random movie that I was involved in, like the comedy, why does that fit into the worldview? And I would say exactly why it does. And it would be a contemplation. So it's back to this idea of the plane crash. I just want to feel the business is settled. And I feel like it has to be settled by that book or that volume, and it have a lot of pictures and some cool stuff.
Do you journal? Do you keep track while you're making your movies of what's going on in your head? I recently read a memoir. It's called Black Postcards. Dean Wareheim's was in Galaxy 500 and Luna, and it's 20 years of touring and recording albums, and it's so specific. And I'm like, he had to have kept a detailed journal, which I admired. I wish I had done that. Sometimes I do when I'm traveling, but not really. Anything like that with you?
Well, no, but I have a political website which has ideas in it, and I go back and write in that, oddly enough. But I don't say, today I thought of this or that. I have journals of writing my movies because I'm trying to make this scene scary, or I had an idea here. I mean, my movies are really, I'm like a magpie. They're just images that have come to me. There's usually sort of a thematic thing or something as simple as a monster that I like. But then it's like, how do those things relate to a theme? So in that regard, there's little books, but it's nothing like Guillermo, these beautiful drawings.
Yeah, sure.
Those are almost self-consciously beautiful, but I'm sure that's...
Like he knows they're going to be like
exactly.
posterity or whatnot,
so he's
right?
like, I'm going to write the beautiful thing.
If you're going to have a kid, you must have you must teach him to have hope for the future. You must teach him, like, we have to have hope. We can change, right? But why your films are always end pretty bleakly, don't they? They all have pretty bleak endings.
Well, it's funny you say that. When I was raising my kid, I was particularly fired up about climate change. You can see that I've almost given up now. It's actually like, okay, you guys fucked up. I don't see how you're going to fix this because you can't even agree there's a problem. And that's why I like my silly movie called Beneath, because these kids just turn on each other. There's a giant fish in the water. Can't we solve this problem? And instead they're like, you didn't go to the prom with me. And you're like, wow.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah,
so even though that movie is disparaged, it's my worldview.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah,
But when I was a little younger, when the kid was, growing up, I would sit around and rant and rave about the end of the world. And I feel like maybe it traumatized him a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't really believe in hope, like that things will get fixed. But I believe back to this idea of something that is manageable, which is grace in your own life and expecting that of others. And that's the best you can do when you're standing in line. You don't just sit there and get impatient, because that's really how you feel.
Yeah.
You try to say, oh, this little old lady's taking her time. It's a little harder for her to make a choice.
Right.
So I can put something good into this world by being more understanding. I might even engage with her, or I'm not a perfect person. That's not the point, but that's the mission. That's all I'm saying. I know what the mission is. Whether you fulfill it every day is entirely a different matter, and I don't claim to any of that. But I think, we've lost track of what the mission even is, which is tragic.
Yeah. What do you think of that? The term, when you make your new movie, them calling your Wolfman movie. Larry Fessenden has some new content to share with us. People
like
calling it content.
My friend uses that word, and of course I forgive him, but I don't like that word.
Yeah,
it just genericizes what we're doing. I actually deliberately say art when I talk about what we're doing. I even said in the blurb about MoMA, I said, thank you for shining a little light on art, because it matters. My point about that is simply not art with a capital A that belongs in MoMA. I'm talking about the engagement with creation and listening to others, which is, art isn't just what you put out, it's the engagement and how people receive it, and the conversation and the implication that we're listening to each other and trying to see other points of view. So that's sort of what the whole art thing is. And it's also just like, I was thinking about this the other day, or maybe it was this morning. It's just like, the whole point is, I wish everyone felt like an artist. In the old days, everybody played the guitar.
Yeah.
Badly. And you're like, oh, God, Johnny, no need. Okay, just one. But actually, there's something beautiful. And, the old uncle would sit down and play the piano.
Yeah, sure.
People should be engaged.
Yeah.
And, this is, once again, now I'm going to rant again, but, our schools, they're vocational schools. No, you should be teaching Updike or some books or whatever, and not just the practical matter of becoming a lesbian, the life experience that is about everybody, and lesbian can be in there. But I'm just saying, it's an engagement with the human experience, and schools should teach that you're supposed to be a civilian, which means you're supposed to be educated in the matters of the day. And you should have some sense of, I'm not well read, so I'm not.
I find that hard to believe.
Well, I just mean art, like go out and make a fort or play with sticks. Sure. That's all I'm talking about.
I agree with you. The difference for me, content and art is, if you post a TikTok video of you lip syncing "Comma Chameleon" by Culture Club, that's content. Mm-hmm. If you do if you've choreographed an incredible dance sequence with 10 of your friends on that TikTok video, that's art. To me, that's the difference. If you've choreographed your own original kind of piece,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But some people are natural artists, and so, like that woman who was imitating Trump that was art.
Yeah. Oh,
do you remember what I mean? It was
5
years ago, but she was very funny, and you're like, this is great. This is just talent. It's so fun.
Yeah.
So, there's dumb things on the internet that are engaging, of course.
Did you what's your son's name?
Jack.
And he's 20 now or 19? How old?
He's 22 now.
He's 22 now. When he was young, 4, 5, 6, did you let him watch horror films? Did you keep all that stuff away from him? Violent imagery and that kind of stuff because there's a lot of controversy about Doctor Strange 2, the new Sam Raimi movie. very violent, very dark, and there's people are like, "Oh my God, it's too dark for kids." And it's like I remember seeing Jaws when I was 5. I remember seeing Halloween when I was 8 or 9. Now, for better or worse, maybe it fucked me up,
Right.
but I remember it instilled in me a real appreciation for horror, and it scared the fuck out of me.
Right.
But what were as a horror film auteur? I'm curious to know what your parenting habits were in regard to his viewing, what was censored or what was not censored in Jack's
Well, we
life.
weren't censoring him, but we didn't want to traumatize him. I took no delight in, like, you've got to see this, before it's your time.
Yeah.
However, I mean, you make your own judgment. He basically started watching Hitchcock at age 9, and we watched almost all of them by 12. Maybe not Marnie, of all things. I guess there's a rape in it.
That's pretty benign, though. I'm talking about like Exorcist.
Well, that's
or
what
Friday
I'm
the 13th,
saying.
yeah.
So he never took to horror.
Yeah.
He didn't care about it. So it wasn't
Yeah.
something I wasn't going to
Okay.
gleefully force it down his throat.
You have to watch Friday the 13th Part 4. It's Christmas
Well,
morning.
he
It's a
would never
tradition.
watch that. He still wouldn't watch it.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
he watched Chainsaw when he was older,
Yeah.
and he said, now that's a good movie. So he could discern, but he was already a cinema snob.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah.
the movies he liked were, remember his age, he liked Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a fantasist, but never really into the darker stuff. And I think he was afraid of, because maybe he's a sensitive person, as I was. The difference is I ran towards it. But it was never his thing. He made a zombie movie. It was his first big movie. And after it, he said, I'm not going to make horror movies anymore. I mean, as if to sort of let me down slowly. But,
When you say it's his first big movie, you mean his first feature film.
well, it was 32 minutes. And that's why
Oh, yeah.
he made a feature next, because his mother said, you can't make 30-minute shorts. They're never going to get into a festival, and you don't have control over the medium. And so rather than make a real short, he came to us with the feature.
Oh, that's cool.
And I liked the script, so I said, well, we'll see if we can make it on a budget.
And that's his path now. He loves it. He's not. This is what he wants to do the rest of his life.
I don't presume.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's a tough road, and there's a lot of things.
Were you a slasher film fan? Did you ever take to the slasher films of the 80s? Were you like, that's trash,
No.
fuck that, I'm above that?
No, well, I never took it that way. It wasn't my taste.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not really into things for their own sake,
Yeah.
And I don't even like horror movies that start with a cold open, although I have one up my sleeve. But
You mean like a death at the beginning and whatnot?
yeah, I mean, of course, Jaws is my favorite movie, so these things I'm saying aren't necessarily true, but I'm just saying sort of horror for horror's sake. What I'm interested in is when it creeps in, like The Exorcist. The first hour of that movie is my favorite part. I don't need the head spinning and all that. I'm like, all right, fine. But, her like, what is the matter with my daughter? And just the daughter peeing on the floor at the party. That stuff is what excites
the dread,
me.
Just the
dread. I
yeah.
think I'm not a horror fan.
Yeah,
I'm a dread fan.
Your movies are definitely filled with dread and existential dread.
And it's because I see. It's like we were talking. I wake up in the morning and it's just like the potential for disaster, the potential for. So, and I do insist that the flip side is then you have to appreciate everything, because I read actually something weird about somebody whose child died. I don't really want to talk about it, but it's just the idea that, oh, now I'm that person. Yeah. Same with, I read this famous commentator, I can't remember, but he said he woke up and the cancer was diagnosed, and he said, oh, now I'm that person. That's my new identity.
Christopher Hitchens, was it?
Hitchens, yeah.
Yeah.
And he said, now I became the walking dead, or a member of, the living. So I really have that. And it's funny, I told you I quit smoking by saying I'm no longer the person that smokes. That's the only way I quit. I just never turned back. I changed my identity, but I wouldn't want that to happen involuntarily. Now I'm the guy with cystic fibrosis.
Yeah.
So why are we talking about that? But
what's part of it? The horror.
So that's what interests me. I never liked I saw them and I was titillated Friday the 13th movies, but I felt they were just for the sake of it. They were content. But it's not to disparage anyone who likes that, like Jen Wexler, one of my comrades. She has a different upbringing. It's also when you were raised.
Yeah.
Because I like the old horror movies, literally the black and whites.
Like the Universal
They're
horror
very
films.
much about atmosphere and, and then
Did you watch horrors? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
Did you watch it as a young kid? Like I remember Shock Theater. Remember Shock Theater? There was a thing that would show a movie every Friday night, a horror film every Friday night. And it was just like on the TV. And
Well, I had Chiller Theater.
yeah, Chiller Theater.
And no, I was completely obsessed, and I watched terrible movies. It's funny because it's one reason I'm not a cine snob.
Yeah.
Because I watch terrible movies because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like the atmosphere, like the Curse of the Faceless Man. I'm sorry, it's not a good picture,
Yeah.
but and all the Mummy movies. I love the other
Well,
ones.
Spielberg, Lucas, all those guys were influenced by those movies from the 50s, right?
But this is what's essential: is that my generation, those guys are older. You're a little younger, but my generation grew up. And it's all just commercialism. You know this story, is that those movies were sold to TV.
Yeah.
And then they started making serials with Dracula, and then they made the monster models. And it influenced an entire generation, Famous Monsters of Filmland.
Yeah.
So I'm literally
collect-
a walking
you collect
cliche. Of course.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm literally a walking cliche. Nothing more, nothing less. Mad Magazine, creepy and eerie. Werewolf by Night, which is Marvel, ironically. Tomb of Dracula. Marvel had their monster series, which they didn't capitalize on as much, although Blade is from that series. Anyway,
But an appreciation for fine literature, Updike, and whatnot mixed in with that,
that's
right?
true. Which was sort of, and also, but mind you, like Scorsese. So then I wanted, in fact, to make movies that were a combination of those two things.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But I would also say It's a Wonderful Life is my other, is another favorite movie. Now, what does that have to do with any of this? First of all, it is a horror movie. In other words,
Yeah.
It gets pretty brutal. It's about life or death, but it's about the choices you make, the moral choices, how you behave in your community, and so on. It may be old-timey, but I still like that. I love Scrooge, another
of course.
parable about sort of redemption. So I think I always had a yearning for a more moral universe, which I knew instinctively didn't exist.
Yeah.
And then I like Frankenstein because he's an outcast in an unjust world.
Yeah.
He's so, this is all. I don't know where you get that, but it has to do with morality is what interests me. And, I loved some of the most awful movies like Man Bites Dog and Irreversible, and I love to hate funny games. But it's not that I'm after extreme gore. It's like those really get at the core of the absolute nihilism of our society.
And there's no such in bad people getting away with doing terrible things.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Although I don't like funny games because the filmmaker presumes that we want to watch that. And that's not why I like horror movies. And I remember seeing The Strangers in the theater when my family was away, and I was like, I'm going to treat myself to a horror movie because I'm the horror movie guy. And I went to it, and when they were torturing the people at the end, I was like, I'm not sure why I'm here. This is just plain upsetting. Yeah. And it's everything I don't want to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't need to watch it happen to these people. So I think of that as a moment when I got too old for horror. But I still first in line to see Wolfman with Benicio del Toro because I want to see how they handle this fascinating idea of if you turn into a wolf, or whatever.
Of course.
So, I'm not really the horror guy that people think I am.
You still do, but you also too, you've gotten behind amazing. Let me just make sure this is. Yeah, good. I'm sorry, we're going to wrap it up here soon, because. But you also, so you do like. Do you still watch a lot of horror, consume a lot of horror, or do you feel like it's 50-50? You'll watch a nice, elevated movie. But again, you've gotten behind lots of amazing filmmakers like Rick Alverson, and Kelly Reichardt to me is one of the most underrated, brilliant filmmakers working today. So before we talk about that briefly, are you watching a lot of movies these days? And is it mostly horror? Is it a nice mixture of drama, comedy, everything? Or what are viewing habits like? Like, what do you... do you still like movies? Watching them?
I watch what are considered old movies.
Yeah,
my wife and I watch film noir on Sundays, which is fantastic. It's just an endless well, and because a lot of them are lesser known, once you see the classics, then you're looking at weird little indie movies, and the filmmaking is so creative and bizarre, and low budget. It's fascinating. So there's that, and then. I watch old movies a lot.
Yeah.
When I had COVID, I watched every Bill Murray movie ever made.
Yeah.
Not Stripes and stuff, but sort of Wes Anderson-y stuff. I like, and then Jarmusch and whatever. So, I like movies. I watched all the Scorsese movies because I was in.
But new movies, you don't like new movies so much anymore. Like they're not as. I
Uh,
find it harder to find new movies that I like because I have to watch 10 movies before I find something that I like. Because I feel like I can't get excited about it because it doesn't have that same kind of excitement or newness or freshness that all the movies in my past had when I first watched them. Obviously,
yeah,
you
I
know?
mean, I think there's a self consciousness about also what's a movie. I mean, it's so confusing, and it does matter to some degree. Am I watching a streaming event, or is this going to end, or
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
happening?
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know what's
yeah.
going on, so I just feel disoriented. But anyway, never mind that. You settle down, you watch something, and I don't know. I don't have a blank statement to say that I don't like new movies. But Kelly Reichardt used to never watch new movies, and I thought it was sort of curmudgeon-y of her, and now I'm becoming that person.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And my wife likes to watch whatever's going on, and she's very up to date, and she'll stare at that screen and go through the net, and I just like, this doesn't feel like this is an event. This
Yeah.
is not how I relate to movies. I go to the new Kubrick movie,
Yeah.
the new Marty film, or some of the new kids, whoever they are, Licorice Pizza and so on. They're not kids anymore, but those still seem like a new generation of auteurs. And anyway, I think it's fair. A lot of it has to do with just what inspired you when you were young. Polanski and Scorsese and Kubrick and Spielberg, Spielberg. I watched Lincoln recently. I love that movie.
Yeah, it's great. How did you develop relationships with people like Rick Alverson and Kelly Reichardt? Because you produced some of their films, right?
I've been involved in almost all of Kelly's movies in an official capacity or otherwise. She's just a friend. I met her in the neighborhood. I was in her first movie. I helped her edit it and taught her a lot about my love of filmmaking in terms of this Hitchcock thing where we discuss how a shot should be, and it was fun. We just bonded over that, and so she'd always share scripts with me, and on occasion I gave her money early on to sort of get started and go location shooting, and that became such an integral part of how she came to understand her script and her story that I was credited with producing, but I'm really just an associate. And same with Todd Haynes. I think she counsels with him a lot. So
yeah, did you ever try to talk to her and say, just playfully, what about a horror film? I feel like Night Moves is the closest thing she has to a horror film.
Well,
I love that film. I love all of her movies. But did you ever try to say, look, come on, Kelly?
I have teased her about it. I mean, just in conversation. She won't have any of that. But I'll tell you, I mean, I have managed, I feel like I'm a groomer. I've brought other serious filmmakers to horror, which I think is a wonderful thing, because my point is we all have fears.
Yeah.
And everyone has a horror story to tell or that they can imagine. And so my friend Joe Maggio, who makes, character portraits on a low budget, I knew that he'd be the man for this very low budget that I had for something called A Bitter Feast.
Bitter Feast, oh,
and
wow,
it's,
yeah.
James LeGros and Josh Leonard. It's a fantastic, kidnapping the critic movie. So once again, it's about cooking, but any filmmaker knows that feeling. I've got a few people I'd like to put in a basement right now. And
who would you like to put in a basement?
Oh, I'm not going to say.
What about
fresh a wound?
Do you ever think that you like Lynch made Straight Story? You ever think you'd want to make a children's movie?
I love that. Well, I have a musical. It's beautiful. It's still melancholy, but it's a beautiful story.
If you made it, or you?
You asked if I have scripts. Ironically, I used to be, and I still would champion the idea that you have one idea, and you have to make it. And that's what I did. I have 3 or 4 scripts, all of which I would make instantly, but of course nobody wants to. But then I decided I'm going to stop this nonsense, and I'm going to make Depraved, and it took me 9 years. So it was a sacrifice. But I felt like it's the only way that I'm able to make a movie. And that's what I'm going to do with this frickin' werewolf movie. If I make it, maybe I won't. But I happen to have these other scripts, which I often write with other people, because then there's the camaraderie and the drinking and the idea sharing that's so wonderful. And that's part of the love of the arts. So I have, and some of them, I have people of note want to make them. But in a weird way, because I'm not singularly obsessed, they haven't gotten made. So I don't know what to say. But yes, I would absolutely make. I have a musical, as I say. It's sort of a a story of two brothers. I have a movie, a circus movie.
Wow.
Also beautiful.
Oh, and not horror.
Not remotely.
Oh, wow. That's
Sentimental
beautiful.
claptrap, you might even
Oh,
say.
man, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
That's
and
great.
after all, I just produced a war movie, which took a long time to make, and
Really? What was the budget of that movie? Was it millions or
Foxhole.
My
son's
Your
movie.
son's movie. Oh, it's a war movie.
Oh,
Is this
yeah.
a couple of people in the trenches or something? Or
Exactly, they're
oh,
in a
that
foxhole.
sounds amazing. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, but it's over 3 different wars, so it's actually very wonderfully strange and visionary.
Oh, that's fantastic. And it comes out today, right?
Yeah.
What is today? Today's May 7th, what, 13th?
Well, actually, it comes out tomorrow, Friday the 13th.
Oh, today's the
Too bad
12th
it's
May.
not a horror picture.
So Friday the 13th, 2022 is coming out. That's great. That's really nice. I'm looking forward to your werewolf movie, Wolfman movie. I'm really curious if it's going to be psychological or literal because lycanthropy. I'm working on a werewolf novel. It's based on a script I wrote years ago. Werewolves are my favorite monsters. If I could ever, American Werewolf in London to me is the greatest horror comedy of all time, and I just big fan of the horror comedy. Obviously.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So, but this is very exciting. Can you give us the name of it? Do you even know what the name of it is yet? Right?
Oh, I do, but
Are
I'm
you
not telling.
Would you play the lead, or are you
Nope.
gonna? Well, it's I love seeing you act too, and it's like you haven't put yourself in a movie in a while, have you?
Put myself, no, but I'm in 2
Well, you're-
movies coming out in the fall, including the Scorsese movie.
Oh my God, that's amazing!
Yeah.
The one he did with Jesse Plemons.
Yeah.
Oh,
And Robert De Niro.
and De Niro. Are you have a big role in that?
No,
It's incredible.
no, I did a
How
couple
many
days.
days?
5 days.
Had you known Marty Scorsese, or did you?
No.
If
But
you-
I was in another movie of his, also a minor, 1 day, I think,
What movie's that?
Bringing Out the Dead.
Oh my God, I love that movie. I remember the difference
do
between being in New York. Talking about identity, part of me, I want to leave New York sometimes, but I'm afraid to leave because I'm afraid of not being a New Yorker. And I've been here in 11 years, and I've been so inspired to be here. But at the same time, I remember I lived in North Carolina when I watched that. I saw it opening night. I saw Breaking Out the Dead on a Friday night as a 24-year-old, 25-year-old, whatever. It was the late 90s, 99, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I was fucking 29 years old. And did not connect with it at all. I'm like, I fuck this movie. I don't like this movie. And then I watched it again, of course, a few years later after being in New York for 6 or 7 years. And I just like, good God, I just loved every second of it. And it just resonated and connected. And I just think it's a brilliant movie. I guess I do remember seeing you in that. Who do you play in that?
I'm just a kid in the hospital for a second.
Yeah,
But-
yeah, that's right.
But I think what you say is actually very profound in terms of how a movie can change. That's why I like rewatching movies as much as trying to find the newest thing. I actually find, and if you look at my shelves, I have books on Cagney, Elvis Costello, Jaws, and Hitchcock. I got a Scorsese book. The point is I've actually always, to my wife's insanity, I seize on certain things and then I just go deep. Mm-hmm. Rather than, and not even that deep, but I go repetitive. Yeah. And that's just my nature.
No, deep. You're deep, yeah.
But as opposed to some people want something new every time and they're looking for the new experience. And also it's because I'm not particularly plot oriented. I don't care what happens. I don't care if the butler did it. In fact, I always tell this joke that I'll be in a theater and my wife will lean over and go, Butler did it. Yeah. And I said, was I supposed to be trying to figure that out? I couldn't care less. I'm looking at the shots. Yeah. I'm looking at the, whether I trust that person or if I have sympathy for, or what colors they're using in this movie. Or I love the music. I wasn't thinking about the butler.
Am I just engaged with what they're talking about? What's happening in this scene?
But I don't follow plots, and so I'm not particularly. Yeah. So just to your point, it's fun to watch a movie again.